Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. If you're new to my channel, my name is Emily and I create videos around tarot and spirituality and witchcraft and magic and all of those kind of related topics. This is my cat Squeaky and she's been sleeping on the bed, and so now that I'm sitting here wanting to film, she's woken up. So she might be in and around the video, so if you just see a tail, that's her. So today I wanted to do a VR to Simon at the Hermit's Cave, and it's not actually a hashtag, I don't think officially, but I'm gonna say it is, and it's the top 5 tarot decks of 2020, and I'm also gonna throw in my top 5 oracle decks of 2020 as well, because this is something I always talk about. I always say I want to add the oracle decks, but I never seem to have enough time, and I think, you know, I haven't actually talked a lot about oracle at all on my channel yet, and I'd like to mention just a few. So I'm gonna try and do my best to stick to the original idea of this tag. Oh, you were so cute. You were just so distracting. You're so distracting, yes you are. So I believe the idea is that we are to feature decks that have been released this year, and at first I thought I'm gonna have a hard time with that, because actually my favourite decks, I don't think all have been this year's release, but actually when I looked at them, all of them apart from one were decks that were released this year. So I was like, okay, actually, you know what, I think there's another that I want to add in here that was released this year, and then I can maybe have an honourable mention for the deck that I have loved the most this year that is not actually from this year. So instead of like doing the favourite decks of mine this year that not necessarily were released this year, I'm going to do my favourite decks that were released this year with one honourable mention that wasn't released this year, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And then I'm going to talk about the oracle decks later. And the oracle decks, I believe one of them wasn't released this year. So 4 of the oracle decks were released this year. So I'm going to just say that's my one cheat. So I think that I'll manage to sort of get around that. I think there's a loophole there. So anyway, I've been talking for way too long, so I'm just going to get right on into it and share some decks with you right now. You're just so cute. Yes, you are. Right, let's get the decks. So first up, I'm going to talk about my honourable mention, and this has been one of my favourite decks this year, and I think this will be one of my favourite decks for all time, but it was not released this year. The first edition was released in 2017, I believe, so it's not a new deck whatsoever. There is a special edition, although I don't have that, I have the original. I'm just coming a bit closer because I don't think that I can show you these decks properly if I don't. This cat is still here, by the way. So my honourable mention is the Afro Goddess Tarot Arcana's first edition, so this would have been 2017, I believe. And there is a special edition, although I don't have that one and I'm not sure what year that was released in. But this deck I did get this year. This is by Andrea Furtick, and I picked up my copy directly from her, and it did come during the whole pandemic, so it got stuck for about 2 months on the border in the UK, I believe, so it didn't get to me for a long time, but she obviously sent it straight away, which was wonderful. But she signs the box as well, which is so lovely. I also have a walkthrough of this deck on my channel. I shared this deck when I did a VR to Masha at Musings by Masha, the Tarot Favourites tag, and I also think I shared this in my Tarot Collector tag by Brant at Moonbaby. Most of the VRs I've done, I've mentioned this because it is so beautiful. I mean, it's a melanated deck, beautiful artwork. I think it's like oil paintings, and in some of the images you can see the brush strokes and the line work. And it's just stunning. There are these beautiful melanated goddess figures. So I just find this deck incredibly beautiful, and the readings have been amazing with this deck as well. They feel very like aligned and heart-centered, really heart-centered actually, and I actually think this deck would be a really nice kind of empowerment deck to use for sort of self-love readings or sovereignty sort of readings. It's a very powerful deck, but it's also romantic, and you can use it for all kinds of readings because it's basically like an RWS clone, but not all the images are exactly the same. You can see this is like the 8 of Pentacles. So all in all, it's just one of my absolute favourite decks. I think it will be for all time, so I have to mention it here. And I'm sad that I can't actually have it in the top 5 because it's not actually this year, but this is a really special deck for me, and I'm so glad I have it, and I think I'd like to get the special edition as well soon. So number 5 in my top 5 would be the mass market edition of the Dark Goddess Tarot by Ellen Lorenzi Prince. I missed this when it was an independent deck. I was just so glad when it came out mass market because I really wanted it, and I wasn't sure I was going to ever get it. And I've talked a little bit about this at more length in my VR2 Masha, Musings by Masha, because this deck I feel is a very authentic kind of deck to have to work with the goddesses. And as I explained in that video as well, I don't tend to use this so much as like a daily draw, but I do use it in larger readings, and I use it as like an oracle deck to give clarity and to add a further kind of message to whatever the draw has been that day, you know, whatever the reading. But I do find this an extremely beautiful deck to work with. I enjoy the gilding. I'm just so glad that it's out in mass market, because I think that there are a lot of people that wanted this deck when it was an independent deck and didn't get their hands on it. So I think that this is just a fantastic deck to have, and I'm looking forward to working with this more and in different ways. I feel like my relationship with this deck is just going to deepen and get more rich and varied, and I think this is going to become a real favourite of mine in my collection, and I'm so glad that I got it this year. This is absolutely a favourite. So number 4, the next deck will be the Murder of Crows Tarot by Corrado Roy. I picked this up sort of maybe September time, I think, and this was released this year obviously, and this is essentially sketches and line work around crows obviously, and then figures, and these are the backs. And it is quite a shadowy kind of deck, so you've got these figures and everyone kind of looks in shadow. Some of the depictions are quite confronting, but I do think it gives a very fair kind of reading. Obviously you wouldn't want to use this with someone who's kind of like nervous about shadowy kind of imagery or scary kind of imagery, but it is not like brutal in any way, and I actually find it to be a very, very fair deck, and I have used it quite frequently since I picked it up, and it's been a real favourite of mine this year. This is Lo Scarabeo, so again a mass market, and I just really enjoy this. I enjoy the very minimal colour. There is a special edition I believe with like red, splashes of red. It's not exactly black and white, there are sort of like gradients I guess of like green and yellow, but it is basically, I mean, for all intents and purposes it is basically black and white, and I enjoy that. I enjoy the sort of stark contrast, and I work with the goddess Morrigan from the Celtic pantheon, and I do resonate with this imagery a lot. There is a particular card or two in this deck that does make me think of the Morrigan and sovereignty, but also the crow is obviously very much related, and ravens very much related to that deity, so it resonates very deeply, and crow energy is really important in my practice as well. So I just knew I had to have this as soon as I saw it, and I'm really glad I picked it up because it definitely is a favourite of mine this year. Next up, my third deck will be the Neorida Tarot collection, and this is the Shadow edition. So I picked this up from Etsy after I saw Simon from the Hermit's Cave showing these decks. I really, really like them all, but this one seemed to resonate more. I mentioned this in my video, my VR2 Masha, because these decks have been like favourites for mine, so I've mentioned them before, but this is just a beautiful, beautiful deck. And there are various different editions. As I said, this one's the Shadow deck, but they did have a vintage one, I believe, or an antique one, and they had a love one that was sort of rose coloured, but I felt like this one would be the most versatile, the easiest to use, and I think it has been. And in all honesty, I do use this quite frequently. I've used this for friends and family as well, for readings for them, but yeah, I actually do enjoy using it pretty regularly for myself, for my daily draws and for other spreads and such. So you can see it's Pixie's original art, but it's been sort of redone essentially by this artist, and I can't think what the artist's name is, but it's Wheel of Fortune Tarot, and it is on Etsy, so I will link it below of course. But this has been just a wonderful deck. So glad that I picked this up this year. It's just definitely been well loved, well used in my collection, and will continue to be next year. The next deck is the Oak, Ash and Thorn deck. I picked mine up from their website after the Kickstarter had finished, and I'm ever so glad I did. I think this is just a beautiful deck. The backs are stunning. I do have an unboxing of this deck on my channel as well, and I just find the imagery in this deck is so evocative for me. It reminds me of my childhood, reading Brambley Hedge by Jill Barklam and The Animals of Farthing Wood, and just the illustrations are stunning. And this deck, sorry I didn't say, this deck is Stephanie Burrows and Adam Uhler's. So stunning. I really love the way that the interpretations from the Rider-Waite-Smith are so easy to see in this deck as well. I think it's just beautifully portrayed, and it is my favourite animal deck as well. So I absolutely love this deck. Oh, dropping cards. So this has been a favourite of mine, and I think will continue to be. Again, I'm saying the same thing with all of them. I just love them all. This is why they're in the video, right? stunning. Stunning, stunning, stunning. Oh, I want to use this now. I just can't stop looking at it, I'm sorry. So yes, Oak, Ash and Thorn, number 2. And my number 1, you can probably guess it if you've seen any of my other videos, is the Bonestone and Earthflesh Tarot by Avalon, Cameron, and artwork by Anna Torian. This is just such a beautiful deck, and I feel so lucky that I picked it up because I didn't back it on the Kickstarter, but I was aware of it and I wanted it, and so I sort of had my alerts on and everything, and so then when it became available I just jumped on it straight away on Etsy. I have absolutely no regrets about that because it is such a stunning deck. Anna Torian's art is just spectacular. I think the artwork beautifully kind of reflects the original RWS meanings, but they are sort of reimagined and reinterpreted in this just beautiful, beautiful way. It's such a vibrant deck in terms of colour. I mean, just look at the colours. And then you've got this beautiful red. There's tons of tails in here as well, and of course you've got the Morrigan as the Queen of Swords, and this is one of the reasons why I had to have this deck as well. Now, this deck I've used a lot for myself, and I've used it a lot for reading for others as well, and I just think there's something about this deck. It is so spot on with the readings, and it tells you stuff that you don't necessarily want to know as well. I said this in my last VR as well, but I do think it's very honest, sometimes brutally, but it delivers it in a kind of very beautiful way, in a kind of poetic way almost. There's a poetry to this, and it's very emotive, you know, looking at the images, there's a lot of motion in the imagery. It's just a beautiful, beautiful deck, and the book is amazing. The book is huge. This is the biggest tarot guidebook for any deck that I've got, other than like even the Druidcraft. The Druidcraft isn't this big. None of them are as big as this, like other than like tarot books that I've got separate that don't come with a deck. This is the biggest book I have for a deck because it's so thick and juicy, and it gives you all of these meanings about the card, and then the story or the myth or the legend or the figure that's depicted or whatever's happening in the card. It's just so depthy and deep, and I do have a walkthrough of this on my channel as well. I can't say much more other than I absolutely adore this deck, and I consider it to be a really, really special part of my collection. It is a really like key part of my collection, but I wouldn't want to not use it, you know, even though it's kind of like really covetable. There's no way I wouldn't use it, you know. So this is my number 1 for the year 2020, and I absolutely love it. Avalon and Anna absolutely smashed this, and I love it. I love it so much. I'm going to put this back in its rightful place. So that wraps up the favourites in tarot for 2020, and I'm really glad I managed to actually stick to it and suggest decks that actually were released this year, as well as my honourable mention. So now I'm going to move on to the oracle decks that I've chose for this year. So for deck number 5, I'm going to go for this Mists of Avalon by Rose in Sarah. And this was released earlier this year, quite early on in the year I believe, and it's a lovely, lovely oracle deck. So the artwork is really different and really special and really unique. And on each card you have 4 keywords around. So you have the title, so this is Camelot, and then you have aspiration, trust, honour and ideals, and then within the book you've got more details about what the card means and how you can interpret it and how you can like use the card. But I just found this a really, really lovely deck to use alongside some of my more Celtic themed decks as a sort of clarifier, something to go along with a reading, and I think it's a really beautiful deck. It's got Caridwen in it, the White Spring, so anyone who loves Glastonbury will adore this deck. The Holy Grail. I found that this imagery really went with the Celtic Wisdom Tarot that I love by Caitlin Matthews as well. The Dragon. So it's just a stunning, stunning deck, and I've really, really enjoyed this. I think this is actually a really, really worthwhile deck to pick up. Highly recommend this one. Next up, a deck I picked up this year, but I don't think was released this year, is the Yeni Oracle cards, Embody Your Lunar Nature by Georgina Kettling. And I picked this up because I was working more with my cycles and like syncing with the moon, and I wanted to sort of work more with moon times and all that. It comes with this little book, and then essentially all the cards are kind of like womb healing. You get these postcards with them, and Georgina writes a little message for you, wishing you best of luck with your oracle cards. The images are all slightly different. It looks like there are different artists or different styles of art. So that is Dream Weaving Yoni, the Enchantress. I believe this deck is available at the Goddess shop in Glastonbury as well, but I actually picked mine up directly from the creator. This is the Yeni of Summer. So you can see all the art is fairly varied, but it really speaks to me, and it feels very sacred to use this deck. So this has been more of a sort of reflective deck for me, and kind of working with journal prompts and things like that to get myself in alignment, and to use these cards more as like guidance. And I will pull a card, but it's not just for like one day or to go with one reading, it's more of like to go with that week or that month, say, or if I'm moving into a new part of my cycle kind of thing. So it's been a very personal deck for me to use, and just incredibly beautiful. I really enjoy the art. I enjoy the kind of sacred feminine symbology here, and this has just been a lovely deck to work with, and I'm looking forward to getting to know it better next year as well. So the next deck I was actually gifted through work, and that is the Messages of the Mermaids, and this is by Karen Kay and artwork by Linda Olson. This is such a stunning deck as well, and the reason I love this mermaid deck above some of the other mermaid decks that I have is because this one is a lot more inclusive, and it's got body diversity and different ethnicities and skin colours. It is a very beautiful deck. The art is stunning, but it feels a lot more inclusive. It sits better with me using a deck like this than using, I won't mention a deck, but using one of the other decks specifically that's a mermaid deck. I prefer using this because this isn't whitewashed like that one is in the same way. So I do enjoy this, and I think that some of the keywords like breaking free, they can be really helpful working with specific spreads, and this has just been a beautiful deck for me to work with this year. So I really enjoy this. I think it works really beautifully in the summer especially. That's a lovely card, it's Blessings. So I really like this one, and I will continue to work with it next year and enjoy it. And number 2 in the oracles is this Seasons of the Witch, which I know a lot of people, which I know a lot of people have been thrilled about working with this year so far, and I heard that there are more to come. I actually heard that this was an indie deck as well, and then they made it mass market. I didn't know that. So this is Seasons of the Witch, Samhain Oracle by Lorraine Anderson and Juliet Diaz, and illustrated by Giada Rose. So I just fell in love with this because Halloween, Samhain, working with this sort of shadowy period of the year, the calendar, working with sort of shadowy themed decks is such a great experience for me at this time of year, which I know it is for a lot of other people, but also the messages on here. There's no other oracle deck that's been like this. So this one is Banshee. So the illustration you've got there is just fantastic, and then you have this as your message. Heed my warning, dear child, for what I hold is far from unsung lullabies. Swallow a nail and you can expect bleeding from within. So this doesn't pussyfoot around. This is not just one of those oracle decks that's gonna like hug you and tuck you into bed at night and tell you that everything's gonna be fine. This is gonna tell you, you know, you need to watch out, or like you need to be doing better, or, you know, it really does hit home. So this deck has just been wonderful for shadow work and for just the wintry half of the year, you know, and it's got stuff about ancestors and altars, and it feels just in alignment for me. Again, I would identify as a witch, so for me this just feels very in alignment. Like I said, this is definitely a favourite of mine, so number 2. Finally, my absolute favourite oracle deck of this year has to be the Tree Whisper Oracle, and this is from Mags at the Woodland Hag here on YouTube. And this deck, this is just such a beautiful deck. So I had this card on my altar for a while. This says, walk slowly, listen softly. I use this deck the most this year since I purchased it. I picked up my copy the first time around, and I did actually edge it, which I think turned out alright, so I'm happy with it. But these images were photographed by Mags, and she manipulated them and designed them so that they would bring out the essence of the tree spirit, and they really do. They just sing. You can see the different faces, the different characters, the different spirits coming through. And what I am fascinated about is what I found as a pattern that would come up. Something in this card would echo something in the reading that I'd done right next to it, and it literally like the same pattern or the same like look of a face or something, like the same colours and the same textures, but it would be like quite strikingly obvious that the two cards next to each other, you could see that flow and that resonance, that similarity between the two cards, and it was just like a dance. It was like a dance between this deck and whatever tarot deck I was using. And of course some tarot decks worked better than others. Like, I absolutely loved using the Wildwood with this deck, and I particularly recall using the Wildwood more than any other tarot deck, and I think that it worked so beautifully. But I did use it with other decks that you wouldn't imagine would pair so well. Like, I think I used the Moonchild Tarot with it a few times. It's just such a stunning deck. I mean, the images are stunning, the way it's been created is stunning, the keywords bring something out of the essence of that spirit, but it doesn't confine you. It sort of helps you to broaden it, if anything, your interpretation. And it's a very, because of the nature of this deck, it is a very kind of intuitive read as well. Oh my goodness, it's just stunning. So Mags, I think she's doing one last final round, and then I think she's gonna do a second edition. And she's also got prints, and she does do updates on her channel quite regularly on where she's at. Orders go directly through her email address. So I will leave her channel link below, and you can contact her if you want to get your hands on a deck or some prints. I've just loved this deck, and I really wanted to mention it. I didn't start my channel until quite recently, as many of you will probably notice. I've wanted to talk about this deck for so long, but I wanted to make sure that I did talk about it before she's finished creating this particular edition. Although, as I said, she might create a second edition. I think she is creating a second edition for next year. But this has been, hands down, my very favourite Oracle deck, and it's just such a beautiful reader. It's so intuitive. So yeah, this deck has been my absolute favourite from the year, and I think it's even nicer to know that it's from someone within our community. And I've absolutely loved Magda's channel for years. So much of her observations and musings and her reflections really resonate with me. The topics that she talks about are so deep and profound, relating directly to her experience and to her journey and to her path, and I just think she's such a beautiful ray of light within the community. So I was so glad to get this, and it is my most special treasured Oracle deck, to be completely honest. It is my #1, and I think it will be my #1 for the rest of time. In all honesty, I don't know how it could be pipped. This is the one. This is the one Oracle deck. So to wrap up, Bonestone, favourite tarot deck. Tree Whisper Oracle, favourite Oracle deck. And that brings me to the end of the video. If you're still with me, I really appreciate it. I think you've got much dedication and strength, and thank you very much. I just want to say thank you as well to everyone within the community who's been so welcoming and kind and generous with commenting and just being so friendly. I absolutely love this community so much, and creating this channel this year has been authentic for me. It's been a really fantastic process, and I feel very happy knowing that I can be part of the community more, and it feels so, as I said, authentic to me to do this. So yeah, I absolutely love it. And as I said in my previous video, I want to be making some more videos about my practice as well as more tarot content. I do hope you enjoyed seeing the decks that I've chosen as my favourites for 2020. If you have some of the same favourites, or you've got different favourites, I'd love to hear from you. If you've done the tag too and I haven't seen it, or I may not have seen it, please do let me know below. Thank you to Simon for creating this particular rendition of this topic and this hashtag. I'm gonna call it a hashtag. I've really been enjoying watching everyone else's. I think it's fascinating to see everyone's favourites, and there have been some amazing decks this year, and actually there are still a few that I want. It's been a whirlwind of a year, and I'm just so glad and so grateful to be here on YouTube, and I thank you so much for joining me. I really do hope that you stay well and safe, and that you have a really happy Yuletide season and holiday season, and whatever it is that you celebrate. I do hope that you're able to do so with loved ones as far as possible, and just keep yourself safe. If you did enjoy the video, do click the like button, and if you'd like to see more from me along these lines, then do click the subscribe button. And thank you again so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed this. I do hope that you stay well and safe and have a happy holiday. Do take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you in another video really soon. Take care. Bye. Mwah.